All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a huge topic, one that touches the price of pretty much everything you buy, the trillions of dollars flying in and out of the United States every year. We're going to cut right through all the noise and just look at the cold, hard data. Okay, let's get into it.
You know, this one quote from President Trump really captures the whole fight over trade perfectly. Because, depending on who you ask, a tariff is either this amazing tool for bringing back American jobs, or it's a hidden tax that just makes life more expensive for all of us. So what's the real story?
Well, to figure that out, we're going to answer three really big questions in this explainer. What exactly is the U.S. buying and selling? Who are we actually trading with the most? And, maybe most importantly, what are the rules and the tools the government uses to manage this whole thing? And just so you know, everything you're about to see is based on the latest official trade data we have right through 2025, so we have the most up-to-date picture possible.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll get a grip on the mind-boggling scale of it all. Then we'll peek inside the shipping containers, see what we're actually trading. From there, we'll look at our biggest partners, we'll tackle that controversial thing called the trade deficit, and we'll open up the government's policy toolbox. And we'll wrap it all up by focusing on that fundamental debate. Is this all about jobs, or is it about the prices you and I pay every day?
Okay, first up, let's try to get our heads around the numbers. Because you can't even begin to talk about trade policy until you understand the incredible scale we're operating on here. So in 2024, the United States imported a staggering $4.1 trillion worth of goods and services. That's the value of every single thing coming into the country. Now, on the flip side, we exported $3.2 trillion. That's everything we sold to the rest of the world. And the gap between these two numbers, well, that's pretty much where this entire political firestorm really begins.
Now, for a little perspective, let's put those numbers up against the entire U.S. economy, our gross domestic product, or GDP. That's the value of everything produced inside the country. When you add our imports and exports together, you're looking at over $7 trillion in activity. That is a huge slice of our nearly $30 trillion economy. It just goes to show how deeply connected America is to the global marketplace.
All right, so we know the total value is in the trillions, but what's actually in all those shipping containers and flying across the internet in digital transfers? Let's take a look inside the crates. So when we talk about that $4.1 trillion in imports, it's not all the same stuff. The vast majority of it, a full 80%, is physical goods, things you can actually hold in your hand. The other 20% is what we call services, things like financial consulting or international tourism. And if we dig into that 80%, the number one category is capital goods. Think heavy-duty machinery, powerful computers, the kinds of things other businesses use to make other things. Next up, we have consumer goods, like the appliances in your kitchen. And number three is industrial supplies, which includes a lot of petroleum. Oh, and here's a fun fact for you. Our single biggest fruit import is the avocado.
But now, here's where it gets really interesting. Our number one export is also industrial supplies, and it's also driven by petroleum. Now you might be thinking, wait, how can we be a top importer and a top exporter of oil? Well, it's because we import one type, heavy crude oil, for our specialized refineries, and then we export refined products like gasoline and other types of lighter crude oil all over the world. Capital and consumer goods are also big exports for us. And on the food side of things, our number one nut export is the almond.
Okay, so we've got the how much and the what. Now it's time for the who. Who are America's biggest trading partners? I have a feeling the answer might just surprise you.
If you guessed China, you'd be really close, but not quite right. As of 2024 and 2025, America's number one trading partner is actually Mexico. Canada's right behind them in second place, and then comes China. These top 6 countries you see here, Mexico, Canada, China, the UK, Germany, and Japan, they account for almost half of all U.S. trade.
Okay, so we know who we're trading with. But the balance of that trade, how much we're buying versus how much we're selling, that's what really sparks all the political fireworks. So let's talk about the concept that drives so much of this drama, the trade deficit.
So what even is a trade deficit? The idea is actually super simple. It's just when the value of all the stuff a country buys from the rest of the world is greater than the value of all the stuff it sells to the rest of the world. Plain and simple. We're buying more than we're selling.
And here's the real kicker. The U.S. has had a trade deficit. We've been on the imports or bigger side of the scale every single year since 1976, for almost half a century. This all really started as America's economy shifted to being a massive consumer of things and global supply chains started to take over manufacturing. And just how big is that deficit today?
In 2024, it was $918 billion, and that was a 17% jump from the year before. Think about that. In 1 year, almost $1 trillion more flowed out of the U.S. economy to pay for foreign stuff than flowed in from selling our own.
So, when you're faced with a massive number like that, what can the government actually do about it? Well, let's take a look at the main tools they have in their policy toolbox.
The government basically has three main levers it can pull to influence trade. First, they can set quotas, which are just hard limits on how much of a certain product can be imported. Second, they can use subsidies, which is basically giving financial help to U.S. companies to make them more competitive. And then there's the big one, the one you always hear about, tariffs, which are simply a tax on imported goods.
Here's a really simple way to see how a tariff works in practice. Let's say a car part from Canada costs $10. If the U.S. government slaps a 20% tariff on it, the American company that's importing it now has to pay $12. The Canadian company still gets its $10, but the U.S. government gets to keep the extra $2. See, the whole point is to make that Canadian part more expensive, which hopefully encourages the buyer to find an American-made one instead.
And believe me, this isn't just some textbook example. This is happening right now. U.S. trade policy has been a total roller coaster lately. In early 2025, we saw major new tariffs hit our biggest partners like Canada, Mexico, and China. But then, just a year later, the Supreme Court actually challenged the legal basis for some of them. That forced the administration to pivot its strategy, shifting toward a broad 10% global tariff using a different legal authority. It really shows you just how fast-moving and legally complicated this whole battle over trade is.
And all of this, all these numbers, policies, and legal battles, it all leads us to the fundamental conflict at the very heart of this entire discussion. So let's break down that core debate so you can come to your own takeaway.
It really all boils down to this one trade-off. The pro-tariff argument, the one you hear from supporters, is that these taxes protect and rebuild our own industries, which creates stable, good-paying American jobs. And the data does show that our exports alone support about 10 million of them. On the other side, the anti-tariff argument is that they're basically a hidden tax that ends up hurting consumers' wallets. And sure enough, studies from the Bureau of Labor Statistics have confirmed that when tariffs go up, the prices you see on the shelf almost always follow.
And so, we end right back where we started, with a really fundamental question. What's more important? Is the goal to have the lowest possible prices for American families to maximize their spending power? Or is it to protect and create more jobs for American workers, even if it means we all pay a little more for things? There's no easy answer, but now that you have the facts, you get to decide.